Despite all of its accomplishments in the past year, CJFE itself has experienced an enormous loss. One of Canada's foremost defenders of free expression, a longtime CJFE board member, a veteran journalist. Many of you know him. You saw him in the video that was just on there. Bob Carty, ladies and gentlemen, died earlier this year. Absolutely deserves your applause. Why not? Arnold Amber, who is CJFE's president, he was also Bob's very good friend. He is on stage to tell you more about Bob, just in case you didn't have the pleasure of meeting him, and what CJFE is doing to honor his memory. Arnold?
Thank you very much. At the celebration of Bob's life in Ottawa and the religious service that accompanied it, I had the opportunity to deliver a short eulogy. And when I did it, I said that if there were a hall of fame for people who stand up in this country and work hard in this country for freedom of expression, Bob Carty would be the first inductee. I go back to that because today this nation has been celebrating in another way a much more well-known person, the death of Jean Beliveau of the Montreal Canadiens. And in it, I've heard now countless times incredible words from everybody about that he just wasn't a good hockey player, which was his profession, but he was a wonderful, and let me use an old term, gentleman. He had class, he had purpose, he knew that he would not want to hurt those around him or anybody else. And therefore he gained the support, the admiration of all Canadians. And so I think Bob was that same kind of person. He was a brilliant journalist. He made radio documentaries at the CBC. He covered everything from the very serious for the stuff in science that only his brain could figure out to make it into a story that all Canadians can easily understand. And from there, he did lighter stories about music, about ice skating, or whatever. So when it get down to his profession, just as people were saying about Jean Beliveau, he was a great hockey player, Bob Carty was a great journalist. But 7 years ago, he ended up getting cancer. And unfortunately for Bob, there were complications from the surgeries, which set off an incredible 6 year of intense pain that would come and go and would be aided only by an incredible amount of pain, killers, et cetera, et cetera. Finally, on September 22, he died, and Bob was only 64 years old. A week before he died, I spoke to him on the phone, and I said, your colleagues at CJFE, we all knew that his time was close because another cancer had developed in his body. I said to him, your colleagues at CJFE do not want your memory to be faded. We don't want you not to be honored. Let's talk a little bit, if you can, about what you would think be fitting. And he said to me, I'm going to think about it again, and I'm going to think about it again and again, and we'll speak again next week. But I could tell you what I would really like, Arnold, is if CJFE did something that would go a long way to continuing my efforts and the fight for free expression across Canada. Well, as life and death would have it, the call that was supposed to be held on the next week never took place. But the reasons that CJFE is so intent on doing it, that Bob actually has been very, very involved in the creation and the sustaining of CJFE over the years. He's been at this for 25 years, both before he ended up with cancer and afterwards. You've seen on the video what he did in that one instance. But Bob's work at CJFE went way beyond it. Whenever Bob took on a project at CJFE, just like he did in his journalism, he got to the essence of that problem. He knew it backwards and forwards. He knew it up and down, and that's why he probably was, at the time of his death, the best expert on the issue of access to information in Canada. But that isn't all he did. Somewhere about 6 years ago, he called me and said, CJFE needs something, and in fact, Canadians need something. And the answer for Bob was the annual review, the CJFE annual review, which covers all the major issues and some minor ones and court cases and so on and so forth that exist on free expression in Canada. There was no such document. There was no such even minor research of that sort until Bob came forward with that idea. And he worked very, very hard, and he is the founding editor of the review, which has come out for 5 years. And one of the favorite little things which he also introduced was the idea from day one that we would grade various government agencies and other people about how well they're doing on the idea of free expression. But that isn't the only thing that he made a great contribution on. There's another organization that CJFE managed for going on 20 odd years, something called IFEX. Bad title, bad letters, but what it is, it's a grouping together of all the freedom of expression organizations in the North, like us, and in the frontline places where a lot of the footage that you saw on that video come from. In other words, frontline states where freedom of expression and journalist rights are hardly existent. Well, how did that all come to be? It started with UNESCO calling a meeting together of 14 groups in 1992. And they needed someone to run that meeting because the bickering and the arguments and the jealousy between one of the groups and the other groups in UNESCO's view was thwarting the fight against the suppression of freedom of expression. And so why don't we work together? And they needed someone to run that meeting, and Bob Carty was the person who ran that meeting. In the years after the creation of IFEX with those 14 groups, there was an incredible unanimity. One of the few things there might have been unanimity with those 14 groups was that if Bob Carty hadn't been chairing that meeting, which went on for 3 days at the University of Montreal, there would not have been any IFEX born. And over the years, just like he did at CJFE, in the founding years of IFEX as it began to expand, Carty was on all the committees to make sure that IFEX prospered. Today it has more than 90 members covering questions of freedom of expression in the press in over 70 countries. So those are some of the things why I would nominate him for a Hall of Fame chair. If you want to know more about it, about Bob Carty and his life and his fight for free expression, inside your notebook, there's a good picture of him, and there's a lot of there's a lot to say about him. So what did CJFE decide to do about Bob? CJFE got together, and at a board meeting a couple of months ago, we set up the Bob Carty Free Expression Fellowship. This will be an annual grant, either for a research project in the field of free expression or other activities that will further the cause of free expression in Canada. This is a small beginning, but we think by doing this, we are coming to grips with what Bob's wishes were. And those wishes were definitely do something that will continue the defense and promotion of free expression across Canada. And so we are launching it. We will begin our search for the first person to get a grant from CJFE in spring of next year, and we will do this every year. And it, like other things that CJFE has done, this will grow and grow. So lastly, I would say to you folks, I hope you enjoy your dinner. I hope you enjoy learning what you're going to learn as we go through the evening. But what I would ask you to really do is take a look at what this organization is doing these days, the magnitude of the issues that we face in this country and around the world, and dig into your pockets. There's things on your desk, on your table, which definitely give you the opportunity to leave a donation tonight. There's an ability, if you go on our website, to join. We could use more members. We could use good, active people who join us in the struggle. We will not accomplish what we should be unless you are there to help us. Thank you very much.